today I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about beheading in New Mexico. So in Spanish colonial New Mexico, beheading was the most common form of execution. So if you were charged and found guilty of a crime that was punishable by death, and the execution was beheading, they would drag you onto the plaza, they would behead you, then they would put your head on a spike like on top of where the governor's palace is, so that way they could display it as a warning to anybody else. That's just the way things were back then. I'm going to give you a couple examples of some beheadings that took place in New Mexico. So in 1598, when Oñate came and settled in San Juan, New Mexico, a lot of his people didn't want to be there. They wanted to come at first, but they had high expectations. So when they got here, their expectations weren't met. So some of them would desert Oñate and flee south. But desertion is punishable by death, so those who deserted would be executed by beheading. So there's this story about these 5 men who deserted from Oñate and fled south. This had to have been anywhere between 1598 and 1607. Oñate sent his captain, who was named Gaspar Villagra, to capture them and execute them. He caught up with them, and he did execute all 5 of them by chopping their heads off. But then after he did that, hypocritically, he fled south and deserted Oñate himself. Now I don't know if he ever got caught for this and executed, but that's just the story. So another interesting beheading that took place in New Mexico history happened in 1641. Governor Luis de Rosas was assassinated, and the men who assassinated him were dragged onto the plaza and beheaded one by one. So basically they assassinated the governor for not being Catholic. While he was in office, they said that he was a Lutheran and a Calvinist, and that he was telling the people of Santa Fe to reject Jesus. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but that's what they said he did, and that's why they assassinated him. While they took him to trial, and he was found not guilty of these charges, and then in 1641 he left office, and after that there was a city councilman named Antonio Baca who took it into his own hands to bring Rosas back under trial, convict him as guilty, and lock him up in a cell while it was the residence under guard. So it's pretty much a cell. He did this illegally, by the way, against the government. That's why he waited till he was out of office until he did it. One night, a group of men broke into the residence that he was held prisoner at, and they stabbed him with a sword. So they say it was about 6 men who did this, and so all these men were dragged onto the plaza and beheaded one by one. And this was done by the new governor, whose name was Alonso Pacheco, and he had council member Antonio Baca arrested for what he did. They dragged him onto the plaza and they beheaded him as well. But even further, they got his head and they nailed it to a post. And this was as a warning to warn anybody that would try to oppose him while he was governor. Subscribe to my channel to learn more.